Hello there, and welcome to the Get French Football News Preview Show. I'm Nathan Staples, and join me this evening are Adam White and Jeremy Smith. We have concluded the European factors, at least for 2018, so we'll have a little bit of a look at the results from earlier this week and also from tonight, as Ligue really had a bit of a power weekend, and also ahead to us another shortened Ligue list, but we'll have a look at those after the latest headlines. Paris Saint-Gemain finished top of their tough group after a 4-1 win over Red Star Belgrade. Goals from Edinson Cavani, Neymar, Marquinhos and Kylian Mbappe sealed the deal, and combined with Napoli's loss at Anfield, they end up as group winners. Lyon will be joining them in the round of 16 after their 1-1 draw with Shakhtar Donetsk. Felipe Moraes put the Ukrainian side in front, but Nabil Fekir's wonderful strike was the goal that decided it, as Ligue finished unbeaten, but finished also in second. Monaco went out with a whimper, really, as Dortmund cruised to a 2-0 win at the Stade Louis II, despite a sort of restricted side of themselves, with former Lorient man Rafael Guerreiro grabbing both goals. In the Europa League this evening, Rennes are through to the next round as they did the business they needed to in their 2-0 win over Astana. A 5-minute salvo from Ismail Assar got the Breton side through at the expense of their Kazakh opponents. Bordeaux did their part of the bargain to try and qualify, as they won 1-0 over at Copenhagen, but due to Slavia Prague's victory against St. Petersburg, the Girondins crash out despite their late charge in the last few weeks. Elsewhere, Marseille finished their European campaign with a 3-1 defeat at home to Apollon Limassol. Last year's finalists recorded the worst points tally for a Ligue 1 side since the Europa League's inception and rename, so with just one solitary point. In domestic matters, 5 Ligue 1 games have been called off this weekend due to the continued Gilets jaunes protests that are planned again for this weekend. Dijon versus Paris Saint-Germain. Just getting the list again. Nantes versus Montpellier, Marseille versus Bordeaux, Guingamp versus Rennes, and Amiens versus Angers have all fallen victim to issues with policing and security measures that would usually be in place, while rescheduled matches include Nice versus Saint-Etienne, which will be played on Sunday at the 5 o'clock slot. Lyon versus Monaco has been switched for TV rights for the 9 o'clock Sunday game, and Caen-Toulouse will be played on the 18th of December. That will be on Tuesday. And that's all for the news, at least, but to keep up to date with all the news in the world of French football, head on over to our website at www.getfootballnewsfrance.com and follow us on Twitter at GFFN. We start this week with those Champions League results, and it's great news for the two French sides that actually had a chance of qualifying, because they are both now through. And Adam, will start with Paris Saint-Germain, who we all kind of expected to get the result that they did, but it's not the easiest place to go to. But while it was maybe a scrappy first half and maybe a little bit of a quieter second, with them really being in control of things, really, they got the result they needed and they're through and top of the group. It couldn't have gone any better.
No, you're absolutely right. For once, everything kind of went to plan for PSG in the Champions League. Not really been the case in the past. In the sort of previous seasons, they've kind of struggled through groups. And I remember the 2-2 draw at home to Ludo Garrett's a couple of seasons ago, when they needed to beat them at home to win the group. And they've managed to sort of trip themselves up in the earlier stages as well as the later stages in their Champions League history of late. But I think that this group as a whole is something of a step in the right direction for PSG, given how their Champions League campaigns have gone in the past. I think Thomas Tuchel deserves a huge amount of credit for finding a way to get this team to look like a team for once. The history of QSI at Paris Saint-Germain has been sort of littered with superstar names and individualistic performances, and managers to be able to get the best out of what is a very talented squad. And I think the Champions League, being the thing that PSG measure themselves against, the performances in that competition this season go to show that Thomas Tuchel has managed to, at least starting to, overcome each of those things. And you look at their performances, this one included, as a sort of progression. They started pretty poorly, like the old PSG away at Liverpool, individualistic performance again, relying on that quality of Neymar and Mbappe on their own to kind of get them through. Then they did, and eventually they kind of fell by the wayside there and lost 3-2. And since then, performances have slowly improved, and they've looked like a team that knew what they're doing, a team that had a plan, a team that had all its superstars playing for the team. Even Neymar, in the last 2 or 3 games, Neymar's been fantastic and looked like he's not only playing for a team but fully invested. And at the end of the day, after that win at home against Liverpool, and they're fantastic, they should have won in Napoli, in my opinion, as well. They deserve to win this group. And I think that from going from a team that looked like it would be the same old thing with those sort of factors that I mentioned that characterized previous PSG displays in Champions League, to going to a team that I honestly think can win it now. If they play like this against teams of the quality of Liverpool and the quality of Napoli, and they play intelligently the way that Thomas Tuchel set them up in the previous 2 games, they've got every chance. It's a wide open competition, and the last 3 games go to show that they're winning with a shout. So huge success for PSG for me, which kind of underlines the fact that they haven't done so well in the past, and that they're still a developing team, that this is a big success, winning this admittedly very difficult group. But it's still a huge success for them on a sort of club by club basis. So big success, and I think that it can only push on from here.
Yeah, and credit to Thomas Tuchel finally sort of setting aside some of those demons. There was a lot of questions after that first match day, wasn't there? But he really has shown his ability to change this team a little bit and improve them as the competition's gone on. And Jezzy's mentioned him already, and I wanted to talk a little bit deeper about Neymar's performance in this game, because this is exactly the kind of performance we love seeing from the Brazilian. He is a fantastic footballer on his day. He scored a wonderful goal in this one. He was kicked to high hell really by some of the Red Star players consistently throughout this game, but instead of rolling around on the floor, he maybe had a couple of chippy moments where he was able to sort of smart back, but at the same time he got up and he played his football, and he continued doing exactly what we expect him to do. And it's much better. The Brazilian is much better when he's focused and he's playing football like this, isn't he?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, just to kind of echo what Adam said, for me, PSG this group stage has been a kind of game of 2 halves. I thought the first 3 matches, and sort of discounting the Red Star match, because that was a sort of match out of the ordinary, and possibly illegally so on the part of some people involved. But I thought against Liverpool in the first match, and certainly the first match against Napoli, they were awful and were not playing as a team. And then the second half of the group stage, they've been excellent. And Napoli in the first half in particular, and then Liverpool superb. And even then, I thought they might go missing again this week, and they didn't at all. I think it was a step up from the Liverpool match. And yeah, Neymar's a huge part of that, I think. And that's always been the frustration. And although sort of post Liverpool match, I think that the English media in particular, and Jurgen Klopp especially, really overdid the fuss about the PSG sort of play acting, considering that Liverpool passed masters at that. And it goes on all over the place nowadays. It has been the frustration at times with PSG, with Neymar in particular. And the most annoying thing is, you can not justify it, but at least for lesser players, you could sort of understand why they have to resort to that. But Neymar is such a brilliant footballer. You just think, if you stay up and play your football, you'll still be better than everyone else. So why do you need to just play for free kicks? And I thought his goal absolutely summed that up. He had 2 or 3 opportunities to go down, stayed up, a couple of brilliant feints, which kind of fooled half of the Red Star defence, and then a lovely chip to finish. And it sort of summed up his match as a whole. And, good attitude, even smiling a few times, not being selfish, even sort of bringing Cavani into the game and making sure that the front 3 had an effect on the game. And that's what you want to see. And as long as they can keep up those performances and that attitude, in the past, to be fair, they generally have been good at group stages. It's when they get to the knockout stages that they sometimes slip up. But if they can keep up these performances and this attitude, then I agree with Adam that certainly on their day they're capable of beating anyone.
Yeah, and I'm sure plenty of teams will not be wanting to draw Paris Saint-Germain in the next round. And again, another maybe string to Tuchel's bow, moving Neymar more inside and having Di Maria out wide and getting all four of them really involved in an attacking sense in these kind of games. They can look so dangerous, and they really did well against Red Star, although they were a bit violent, maybe might be the best way to put it, really, more than anything. I think it felt more like a Sunday game for them sometimes, at least. But onwards we go to another side that managed to qualify for Ligue, and that is Lyon. Terrific news for them. They are unbeaten, but the asterisk on that one, Adam, is it's 5 draws, so we can't really get too overly excited. But the victories against Manchester City as well, so they can take some credit from that. A tricky group for them. You'd say that Shakhtar and Hoffenheim are teams that are of a similar level, but at the same time, probably the difference between both of those sides was the difference between the teams last night as well, and that's one man in particular who shone, and that's Nabil Fekir, who grabbed a superb goal. He even had a great goal disallowed as well for offside, rightly so. There was about 7 players offside as well with him. But when you have someone of that talent, it can just be the difference between going through it and going out.
It really can. And, Lyon have missed Fekir this season. Okay, he's only actually missed 5 games through injury, but he's sort of been affected by injury coming back from those games, and he's doing a little bit out of match practice after the World Cup, of course, a little bit sort of tired after that very extended run France had in winning the World Cup. So, he's taken his time to sort of ease his way into this season. And I think yesterday's game really showed what an important player he is. I mean, that might be a bit of an obvious statement to make, that Nabil Fekir is an important player for Lyon. But when Memphis Depay's taken a lot of credit recently and taken a lot of the limelight, if you like, Hostamara, Ndombele have all been fantastic at times this season. You kind of almost forgot about Fekir a little bit. But I think it showed last night that he's still their main man and he's still the most important player. And if Fekir's playing well and you've got him in the right position, then he could be devastating. And Lyon are a dangerous team in this competition now. And just going back to the you said about the group, it's a bizarre run of results that you don't lose, but you only win once and go through, and the game you win is against the favourites. It's away from home as well. But which looks bizarre. When you look at the rest of Lyon's run, I think they deserve a lot of credit for those draws, those 5 draws they got. Going unbeaten in the group stages anyway is very impressive for a club like Lyon. But those draws should be caveated by a number of things. I mean, first of all, they could have beaten and probably should have beaten Manchester City at home. They're very good in that game. Had 3 huge chances, Cornet and Depay missed in the first half, and honestly could have been out of sight by half time. They were fantastic in that game. They really should have won away at Hoffenheim. They were leading that game, conceded a late goal, that Kramaric goal, and the 2-2 draw at home to Shakhtar was played behind closed doors, and they were 2-0 down and came back to draw 2 each. So perhaps that's another. We should really be giving them credit for that result rather than pointing out that it was sort of a game that perhaps they could have won. And playing game at home behind closed doors against such a good team is tough. And conditions again last night were very, very tough in Kiev. It was a great game to watch because the pitch was slippery. It was pouring down with snow. The orange lines. It was great. It was a really entertaining game, and Lyon deserve huge credit for coming back into that game, having been 1-0 down against a team who are much more used to those conditions. Although I suppose they are half Brazilians in that team, so maybe not so used to them. But even so, they deserve huge credit for playing so well in that game, and arguably could have been again outside by half time. Both Depay and Bertrand Traoré should have scored before the break, and overall they've actually been fantastic in this group, and you can make a case for them being the best team. And Genesio has proven that he's good at setting up his team to play against teams that are of similar or better quality and getting results in those games, as the away leg in Manchester City showed. Obviously, that results in Ligue and show the opposite side of that they can be frustrating. You can sit against them and you can beat them that way. Like Reims did beat them 1-0 in the league, and there have been very similar other results to that. But this is a competition that might suit this Lyon team. So an extended run in the Champions League isn't beyond the question for Genesio and what is a very, very talented and, on its day, very well-organised team. So huge credit to Lyon and Genesio. He gets a lot of stick in France, but he serves a huge amount of credit for this Champions League run so far.
Absolutely, yeah. And Fekir, I know on the main show on Monday, on Sunday that I compared him to sort of the Wayne Rooney recovery rate of it. Maybe takes him a couple of games to get the engines revving, but my word, when the engines are revving again, he can be a fantastic footballer. And Jez, to Adam's point, really, it does become interesting for them at this point now because, in all honesty, while we expected that Lyon may get the chance to come through, when it does come to the round of 16 in February, there's a lot of tough teams that they might have to be facing. I mean, there's they obviously will avoid Manchester City and Paris Saint-Germain, but there's Barcelona, there's Bayern Munich, there's plenty of tough ties. Borussia Dortmund as well are playing terrifically at the moment, unbeaten in the Bundesliga. But at the same time, then one of the sides out of those teams that finished second that won't really fear facing anyone, really.
Yeah, I think they, had they failed to qualify last night, I think they'd have really been kicking themselves, because I think away draws are good results, and it would have been those home matches against Shakhtar and Hoffenheim, which would have been the frustrating ones. And obviously the Shakhtar one, I mean, there's an element of credit for coming back from 2-0 down, but in other matches, the way that they threw away leads, arguably, although it's great that they finished the group unbeaten, only having one win to show for it really doesn't do justice to how good a qualifying campaign it was for them. And yeah, I think they're sort of a dangerous dark horse now. I'm not saying that they can necessarily win it, but certainly for the next round, I don't think that. I think probably the target was to qualify for the knockout stages. So I think it's fair to say that anything now is a bonus. And again, beating Manchester City, who are one of the best teams in the world at the moment, away from home, shows that they too, on their day, are capable of beating anyone. And certainly, as we've discussed numerous times before, they've got match winners in their team. And this time it was Fekir who stepped up. He hasn't been so great of late, but showed again what a class player he is this time around. Next time it could be Depay, it could be Ndombele. There's enough players there who are capable of giving any other team a fright on their day.
Absolutely. And just before we move on to the Europa League, a very quick nudge of Monaco. It's been a terrible campaign for them in the Champions League, and I'm pretty sure they'll be happy to just be out of Europe completely. And if only Badiashile could actually tuck his chair in, then maybe they could do some kind of business, maybe at least anyway. But let's go on to the competition from tonight. And Adam, Rennes managed to get the result they needed. They just needed a victory over Astana. It was a straight shootout between the two. They got the 2-0 victory and are through to the next round. It's a terrific result for the new interim coach, Stefan, who did praise Lamucci's effect on the team, at least anyway, in this competition previously to him, and credit to him. But they've had a bit of a turnaround. We mentioned on Sunday how good they've been since the change in manager. It's given them a new lease of life, and especially the man who grabbed the two important goals tonight, Ismail Assar, who looks like finally he's pushing on to getting that form that we expected him to move on to as a promising player at Metz. With a move to Rennes, we always thought he may be a superstar in the making, but he's really on fire at the moment.
Yeah, he was brilliant tonight. Got both goals. One was sort of a rebound for a saved Benjamin Borogo penalty, and the second goal was fantastic on the turn, the edge of the area. Smashed it into the top corner. It was fantastic, and he's an extremely talented player, and he's so quick and direct, and got so much power that the thing is, he's still developing, he's still growing, he's still maturing as a footballer. He's only 20 years old, which is really quite scary when you think about it. So yeah, he's a huge asset to Rennes, and they're a team that are perhaps go a little bit under the radar, but they're another team full of players that on their day are superb in Ligue and at Europa League level as well. I mentioned Borogo there, is very, very good. Not the best season so far, but fantastic. Patton Ben Arfa, it goes out saying, that season at Nice, if he can recapture anything like that for him, he'll be devastating in both this and this competition and in Ligue 1. Grenier is a fantastic signing, and not great tonight from what I saw, but is an extremely gifted, technically gifted footballer in midfield, and Benjamin Andre is a superb sort of leader in that midfield area as well. So they've got a great team potentially. I think that Stefan's right to praise Lamucci. I felt when Lamucci was sacked that it felt a little bit premature, even though they'd been really poor at occasions this season, but it just felt like they were struggling to handle the 2 games a week, traveling for the Europa League and then playing tough Ligue 1 games against teams who would see them as a superior force and would try and frustrate them and sit in against them, as Rennes again did to them when winning 2-0, René Udan scoring twice a few weeks ago. So it felt a little bit like the success of last season deserved a little bit more of a chance, because there was so much to build on there, and they got such a good team, and he'd done a good job, even though perhaps it was starting to get a little bit frayed. I still thought it was a bit premature, but it's clear that that Julien Stéphan, he's the son of Guy Stéphan, who's the assistant to Deschamps for the French national team. You probably may have seen him at the World Cup. And he seems like an extremely talented guy. So they kind of feels like they may have fallen on their feet here, because Ben Arfa was thinking about leaving. What sort of, maybe this is part of Lamucci's removal, that he'd fallen out with Ben Arfa, and it felt like that he was going to leave in the window in the winter. But that's changed now, and Stefan said at the weekend, we're not going to give him any rules. We're going to just let him play, which for a player like Hatem Ben Arfa must be, music to his ears. So he's been fantastic in these 3 games since. 2 brilliant wins against Dijon and away at Lyon, and tonight as well. So Rennes are a team on the up, and an exciting proposition both for the Europa League and for Ligue in the second half of the year. And Stefan's been confirmed as manager at the end of the year. He could be. He's only 38. He could be, sort of the French. Maybe building up a little bit, but there are younger managers in other leagues that of a similar profile that he may be able to emulate. So it's an exciting start for Rennes, and they might have stumbled across a formula here. So hopefully they can continue.
Yeah, absolutely. I think someone like Hatem Ben Arfa definitely needs maybe the shackles left off him, and it's good to see him finally sort of expressing himself again, is maybe the best way to put it, as always. Jez, the other games, really, we feel a little bit sorry for Bordeaux, who got the win tonight, but wasn't enough, really. They left it probably a little bit too late, but I'm pretty sure you'd quite like to talk about Marseille's defeat to Apollon Limassol. It's only 1 point that they got back at the Cypriots team back on in week 2, but it's been for the former finalists. But it seems pretty easy to forget that they were in the final last season now. But they've had an awful campaign. They've lost every other game as well, and it's a pretty embarrassing defeat tonight. Despite a couple of changes, they still had Tovan out there. They still had a couple of players, but they did move some of the second stringers out there as well. But it's not looking, with combining this with the form in the league, at least anyway, where they've lost more games already this season than they did all of last season. It's not a good look for Rudy Garcia.
No, Marseille fans like to pipe back to that time they were in the Champions League and finished with 0 points and keep going on about, well, it was because it was the group of death, blah, blah, blah. This time, you could argue that FC Dudelange of Luxembourg were in the group of death, and yet they came out of it with the same number of points as Marseille. There's probably not too much point reading too much into tonight's match, because everyone knew they were out, and it was just a case of getting through it, a little bit like Monaco the other night. But as you said, at the same time, although there were a few changes, and Escal in goal, for example, showed that they maybe weren't taking it 100% seriously, there are enough players there who should have, just for pride at least, played for 3 points, and 2 sendings off, 1 at the start, 1 at the end. I think most people know that I don't really rate Ocampos as a footballer anyway, certainly not as a centre forward. And it's embarrassing. And I've said it before. Last year, a lot of what they did brilliantly was mental strength and getting wins that they didn't always necessarily deserve, but they were always in matches, and they always looked like they cared more. And I think that did win them a few extra points. And you'd expect maybe a little bit of tail off, but this year it feels like that there's been quite a big drop in that part of the game, and that's the worry, because okay, it's all very well doing it at home to Limassol when you're already out of the competition, but in tighter Ligue 1 matches, when there's a lot more at stake, and everything does point to the fact that it is going to be a really tight battle for Champions League and or Europa League places, that could be the difference again this year. And with the more senior players to be able to turn it around, but it does feel like that they should have already done that, and they really need to get on with it sort of sooner rather than later.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you also take into the factor, like we say, that they've been not great in the league this season, and when you're a second string player, this is a perfect chance to play for pride, but also stake a claim for the spots that might be open in the first 11 for the main games, really, at the moment, because there's not particularly anyone particularly in great form, and yet they sort of lack that again, and it's a bit disappointing, because it points to what you've said a number of times, Jez. The lack of depth in the club it does start to worry you, and going into the second half, well, the very end of the first half of the season, and then past the winter break, have they got enough then to compete in their Champions League places with the teams that are currently above them? It remains to be seen. On to Liga matters now. And I want to start with something that I'm sure a lot of our fans and others that do listen to the show will want to hear about. It's the sort of postponements, and I'll bring you in on this, Jez, really, because obviously the Gilets jaunes process have been causing these with the interruptions for the games last weekend, but many thought that maybe that would be the end of it. That hasn't happened. There's still planned protests, and that is pulling police resources that is affecting league and games. Is this something that could roll on throughout until the winter break, do you think, or is this hopefully the last weekend of that will interrupt our football more than anything? Obviously not stating the lack of significance obviously for these protests. They are important to the people of France, of course, but it's really affecting what scheduling will happen sort of into the new year. They've moved some of the games from last weekend into mid-January. They've not really sorted out a time when they'll be able to do it for the games this weekend that have been suspended. I mean, Paris Saint-Germain have gone 2 weeks, a few of them, Marseille as well. It's starting to get a little bit worrisome for not just for obviously people missing the games really, but also getting them scheduled for later on.
Yeah, I think it could be a problem. I mean, I'm hoping that it is sort of, maybe this will be the last set of fixtures sort of majorly affected by it. Macron's starting to make concessions. That, if anything good comes out of the attack in Strasbourg, maybe it's going to make, people sort of have a bit more sort of kind of perspective and possibly calm themselves a little bit. And obviously with Christmas coming up, and then if they can get to the Christmas break, then a good month for everyone to calm down. But certainly last weekend and this weekend is going to cause a lot of problems in terms of rescheduling, and particularly for those teams in European competition. You're going to have midweek matches, so there's less obvious spaces to fit those matches in. And I know that I think Nantes have been complaining about how some teams are playing and some aren't. It gives some teams an unfair advantage, and that they'll have fewer matches to play in the second half, and that they're able to already sort of steal a march on their rivals. I think they're probably thinking about Rennes more than any other team in that sense. That's what they're spending to play the other day. But yeah, it's not great, and it's good that at least this time they've hopefully managed to shuffle a couple of the other matches around, so they're still going to be played, even if not at their original kickoff time. But yeah, I've seen the Ligue 1, sort of the gods who are in charge of preparing the fixtures are going to be quite busy over the next couple of weeks trying to work out where and when to fit everyone in, because you'd hope that however they manage to do it, no one is sort of disadvantaged by having too much of a backlog and too many matches in a short period just to catch up what they missed. And although it might have caused even more admin problems, it does feel like possibly the more sensible thing would have been just to have cancelled the whole fixture list. Certainly last weekend and possibly this one too.
Absolutely, and that's the when we look into the new year, really, they've managed to obviously squeeze those ones in mid-January, but it's not just European competitions. You think of the latter stages of the Coupe de la Ligue, and obviously the Coupe de France starting sort of in the second half of the season as well for Ligue 1 sides. It all starts congesting itself. I suppose they might be pretty pleased that they may be able to maybe add a weekend on maybe at the end that without an international competition, although obviously there's Nations League stuff, and that I suppose there's the end of the Champions League. So should anyone reach that sort of stage at least anyway, that may interrupt. But might be a little bit of a headache should it continue for any longer. But let's focus on some games that are happening this weekend, and again it will be a shortened list. There's only 5 games, but we have 3 really interesting ones that still stick out for us, which is good news for our show at least anyway. And Adam, we're going to start with one of the ones that hasn't really moved in terms of scheduling kickoff wise, and that's between 2 sides that arguably are in form. They've had a great couple of weeks at least anyway, and that's Reims and Strasbourg, who've both had a good run of results really. I mean, the home side will be delighted with their recent run of form. I mean, despite the loss to Toulouse, they got a great draw against Lille where they were really unlucky not to win. They were terrific against Marseille the weekend prior as well, with Edouard Mendy having a terrific result, and they obviously got 2 wins before that as well. They've in a great position in the league. I mean, they're the meanest defence. They're they're starting to at least be a little bit more dangerous on the going forward, although they've not scored too many goals still. What do you think to their so far their start of the season? Have they positioned themselves into a great spot where they might not even have to worry about relegation if they continue like this going into the second half of the season?
Yeah, you have to say that for a promoted team and a team that lost a lot of really important players over the summer, we sort of mentioned before, sort of the spine of the team was taken away with Julien Jonvier going to Brentford, Nelson de Cruz leaving, who was their holding midfielder last season. Diego Viganato is a player I really like, leaving as well, brilliant on the ball. And Shibachu going to Rennes. They really did lose some talented players over the summer, and the fact that David Guillon has managed to sort of gel some new players and some sort of standout Ligue 2 players and the remainder of that team into an extremely effective, extremely organized unit is a very underrated achievement. And we've talked about similar size in recent years coming up from Ligue 2 and doing a very similar job. Maybe Rennes are a little bit more defensive than perhaps excuse me, perhaps Nîmes this season or Angers in the past, who are still relatively defensive, and Amiens last season. But this Rennes team deserve huge amounts of credit and agree on himself. So I think absolutely right that they have positioned themselves brilliantly in that they're very, very difficult to beat. They keep getting results away from home against teams that perhaps they'd be expected to struggle against. They're currently 11th in the league, 22 points from 17 games is really quite impressive. It's quite a big gap down to Caen in 18th. 8-point gap already, and if they continue to play like this and pick up points in a similar way, you'd have to fancy them for a comfortable mid-table finish, which, given their team on paper and the turnover of players they've had, is fantastic. And just picking up on some of those results, they were very unlucky not to beat Lille at the weekend, and that last minute goal ended in a 1-1 draw. The game at Marseille, they were so comfortable defending against Marseille, it was ludicrous. All right, it finished 0-0 and they didn't offer too much going forward, but the fact that they were able to hold what is not necessarily a free-flowing attacking team by any means, but talented individuals at least at bay so comfortably for 90 minutes in a volatile atmosphere was really quite impressive. And they've picked up some really impressive wins. That result I mentioned earlier on in the season against Lyon at home, they frustrated them and nicked the goal on the break. Chevalier has been relatively clinical in that sort of regard. He hasn't had many chances, but he's taken his chances when they've come on those sorts of occasions. The one that went at home to Monaco was fantastic. Mathieu Cafaro was fantastic in that game. So I think that, and also that just came to mind that the win at Rennes was brilliant. Rennes Udan scoring twice there. They sat in, defended, took their chances when they came, and you can't argue with clinical enough on occasion when they get their chances, and very stoic at the back. So huge credit to David Guillon, and they could, it's not beyond the realms of possibility that they push towards the top 8, top 6 would be a little bit of a stretch, but they'll be thinking along those lines, and fair play, they deserve it. They've been great.
Yeah, and they're so tough to beat. That's the main factor, isn't it? And I know our mid-season awards will be coming up very quickly in the next couple of weeks. And if Eduardo Mendy doesn't win the goalkeeper one, there's got to be someone who's going to be spectacular in the next couple of weeks, because he has been terrific for them this season, and a big bonus for them. In terms of Strasbourg, really, Jez, I know we spoke about them a few times in the last couple of weeks. They got a fantastic result against Rennes. That was the last one for Lemouchi, and they followed it up with that draw against Paris Saint-Germain, where they were excellent and maybe could have nicked it. They were a little bit unlucky, obviously the offside goal in the last couple of minutes as well. They should have really won that game against Caen. They'd be really disappointed that they couldn't hold on to that victory, but they've looked much stronger over the last couple of weeks. I mean, at the start of the season, we mentioned that maybe they got fortunate with some of the results and the red cards that they were getting, that maybe it was a false dawn, and we'd need to see further into the season just how good Strasbourg could be this season. And they are sitting pretty in 8th. It doesn't look like a relegation battle is going to cause them any problems either. And they've got a nicely balanced side that can cause, on their day, at the moment, anyone problems.
Yeah, as well as the side, they've also, I think, got one of the better managers in Ligue. He's done a very good job at GFC Ajaccio and at Strasbourg last year, and again this year. You look at the team, and as you said, very balanced. They've got really solid goalkeeper now, decent enough defenders, and playing back 3, but with players like Lalo, who's I think been a very good player for a few years now. I always liked him when he was at Valenciennes, but he seems to have stepped up even further. You've got players like Sissoko, who, you know, they're barely missing Olu. Martin, who, you know, a little bit like what Adam said about Benjamin Andre. I think he's just a, you know, really solid, experienced player who I think could sort of bring something to any team. And then players like more explosive players like Thomason, Motiba, who can put away goals. So, and you know, I think however good your team is, to really make a bit of a step up, I always think you need a reliable goal scorer, and I think Motiba is really showing that, even though he's being a little bit like Alcacer, as Eric alluded to at the weekend show, in that he's not even necessarily starting games, but when he plays, he scores. And you know, if you've got goal scorers, like I said, you've always got a chance. And I do think it's a really settled, really balanced team who are, you know, a little bit off the radar, despite obviously you know, being a club with a bit of a history and a great support. They're not the sort of fashionable teams like some of those around them, or teams like Nice and Rennes, who people are always looking to be pushing further up the table. And yeah, we're off the back of the last three results or so. And as I said, in terms of the postponements, it sort of hampers some teams, but it gives other teams a chance to make a bit of a psychological statement. And if Strasbourg were to win, you know, they could move up to sort of 5th, 6th place. I guess it depends a little bit on the Saint-Etienne Nice result, but you know, finishing the weekend ahead of Marseille, would I think be quite a big boost for them. Another little blow for Marseille, even if they would sort of have 2 games in hand at the end of it, and it really puts them into the reckoning for, you know, to be a dark horse for European places.
Absolutely, and it's great to see Adrian Thomason really, like you mentioned there, just start scoring goals. He looks by far better player than he did at he only ever really showed flashes, but he's been really terrific at Strasbourg, especially over the last couple of weeks. And I'm pretty sure I might start my own petition that more players should tuck the shirts in like Nebo Matiba. It's a nice little look. Not enough players do that nowadays. They all want to deal with the rebellious sort of out of the shirt look. Then they all need to smarten up a little bit and start sticking the shirts back into the shorts. Well, where's the class gone? It's the Badashile thing all over again, isn't it? So let's get some predictions. Start with yourself, Adam. What do you think the score will be?
1-0 Reims.
Jez?
I'll go 1-0. I like them both. I think they're both tough to beat. I think they'll cancel each other out.
I'm going to go the opposite end of the spectrum then, and I'll go 1-0 Strasbourg. I really like this side, although I do also quite like Rats at the moment. I think maybe Strasbourg's quality might just show through at that point, and maybe a Libo Matiba goal again. On to one of the slightly rescheduled fixtures in Nice versus Saint-Etienne, and starting with the home side on this one, Adam. Nice, we'd mentioned, had a great run sort of late October and through November. They got 4 wins in a row, including victories against Lille and Bordeaux, with nothing to scratch your head at, especially when we mentioned that Vieira's side were a bit boring. They weren't really getting the results that we wanted to see them get. But now, since then, unfortunately, it's been 2 goalless draws, which doesn't sound too bad. But when you say it's against bottom of the league, Guingamp and Angers, you start questioning things again. It's a weird mix at the moment. They've got a great record of 6 clean sheets in a row, which is tremendous. And Walter Benitez has been terrific as well. He's maybe the only contender against Mendy at the moment, really, for that goalkeeper award. But at the same time, the worry now turns to, are they going to score enough goals to stay in the hunt for Europa League? And against a team like Saint-Etienne that will really test them at the back, can they win out in games like this?
Yeah, it's an interesting question there, because I think that there's a sense that although Nice have found their feet a little bit under Patrick Vieira in the last few months or so, last few weeks perhaps, that they're still very much in transition. And this is a team that is a little bit sort of, I wouldn't go as far as sort of say thrown together, but it feels a little bit unbalanced, the squad at the moment, in that there are certain areas that are performing well, there are certain areas that really aren't. They're under strength in certain areas, and they've had some younger players, some new blood coming in over the summer, and that situation is taking a lot of time to gel. And obviously, when you add a cantankerous Mario Balotelli into that mix, you're very likely to be sort of thrown out of whack, out of balance, and it feels like they're muddling through at the moment, and that Patrick Vieira, although may have some good ideas, and obviously is an intelligent guy, and did relatively well anyway with New York City. It's going to take him a lot longer than even this season, perhaps, to really find his feet and find the team that he wants. And in terms of goals, Balotelli's been pretty poor since coming back into the team. There was sort of accusations that he was unfit, and even when he has sort of found himself, established, and he's started the last 5 games, hasn't finished any of those games, but has been really, really pretty poor in all of those outings. You're kind of relying on Pierre-Elise Malou, who's a player that, as far as I understand, from Nice fans and observers French, divides opinion a little bit. I quite like him personally, but he's not the most consistent. And that same goes for Alain Saint-Maximin in a very sort of different way, in that he's extremely exciting on his day, but anonymous in other games. And that leads to extremely temperamental front threes. So they've been relatively solid, and they've got a couple of results that you mentioned in the last few weeks in drawing 0-0 with Guingamp and Angers. But although those are points and they'll take them, they're against teams that they would be expecting to beat. So I don't see Nice finishing any higher than the position they're already in 7th this season. And I would make Saint-Etienne pretty strong favourites for this game. And Vieira's done a decent job so far with what he's been given, but they still are figuring everything out for me.
Yeah, and it's almost like a turning of the tide between the two teams, really, Jez, because a couple of years ago we'd have said Nice were a good attacking side as well, especially under Lucien Favre and scoring goals, and now they're a real defensive machine, whereas Saint-Etienne, especially under Galtier, would have been certainly described like that. But in the last couple of weeks, really, in the last month or so, really, for Ligue, you look back at the games and avoiding sort of the Lyon game where they didn't score. The other games are 4-3 against Angers, 2-0 against Reims, 3-0 against Nantes, and that 3-2 result against Bordeaux a couple of weekends ago now. It's almost like they're changing back to the other way under Gate. They're becoming a more attacking team led by sort of Wabi Kazri at the moment, really, more than anything. But are they slowly changing their identity to almost the other side of the spectrum to what they were previously?
Yeah, it's weird because everyone was always debating, is Saint-Etienne holding Galtier back, is Galtier holding Saint-Etienne back, and maybe they were holding each other back and didn't realise that they were capable of being a little bit more attacking. But Galtier's side in attacking wise at Lille and Saint-Etienne are certainly a lot more entertaining than they were under him. And obviously a lot of that is down to the personnel they've got. And in you take the last match that they lost against Bordeaux, but Diony, Cabella, Salibur, Kazri, they've got Monet Paquet, who I still think is effective attacking player, even if he doesn't score enough. They have goal scorers and exciting attacking players in there, and it's just a case of whether they can click or not. And for the most part, they have. And Kazri to me isn't really a centre forward, but he can always muck in with a lot of goals. Cabella on his day, I still certainly to watch, one of the best attacking players around. And Diony is not quite capturing the form of a couple of years ago, but certainly better than last year. And you feel that a little run of 2 or 3 goals, and he could really be back to his best. And then behind them, a little bit like we said about Strasbourg and Reims, they've just got a relatively nicely balanced side with a solid enough defence, a couple of decent attacking fullbacks, and a relatively authoritative midfield. So I think that they'll definitely be in the shake-up for European places. And whereas, as Adam said, I think Nice are a talented side in theory, but I just think that they're nowhere near as developed either individually or as a team as this Saint-Etienne team. And I think they're certainly better placed to finish the season higher up than Nice, who I think are still, in terms of the team, the coach, and several of their players, I think they're lots of potential, but still a work in progress.
I think maybe both of you have shown your hands a little bit on this one, but I am going to still ask for predictions, and I'll start with yourself then again, Jez. What's your scoreline in this one?
I mean, it's tough because Nice are keeping it very tight at the moment, but I think Saint-Etienne will come out on top. I'll go 2-1.
Adam?
2-0 for me.
Yeah, I'm going for a 2-0 Saint-Etienne win as well. It just feels like Nice aren't creative enough going forward at the moment. And without Balotelli striking, Maximin still being sort of very mercurial is maybe the best way of putting it. And Saint-Etienne will get you goals at the moment, really. But despite that sort of poor performance against Lyon a few weeks ago, that the sort of outlier really in what has been a really good month for them, even though they did last time out as well. On to a final game, and the one on Sunday. So it would have been a more interesting fixture, but it still stays interesting despite Monaco's struggles as they head to Lyon. Adam, they were disappointed, obviously, with the result they got midweek, but that will be in the past behind them now, and focusing on another big game because they've only got a couple of games before the winter break. And with Amiens winning against Guingamp the previous week as well, while with Monaco sitting out, they are now back in that bottom two. So important, regardless of the opponent in this one, to try and get a result and try and force something before this winter break kicks in.
Yeah, it really is. It's very difficult to know. I can't really make my mind up about Monaco. I mean, having watched them over the last few games, I really kind of side whether they've just been fortunate to get to those 2 wins that they got both away from home, or whether they are slowly improving. I'm slightly worried that this team just may be pretty poor, and that there's nothing really that Thierry Henry can do. And although they got those 2 wins, it's still only 2 wins in the last 5. All right, the 2 other games against Borussia Dortmund and Atletico Madrid, and then Montpellier, who are very good at the moment too, and they were leading that game. It still feels like there's a very, very long way to go for Monaco. And then there may be a chance this weekend against Lyon, who will probably be, having travelled to the Ukraine and back, and so mentally tired after that game against Shakhtar. Monaco having, the week or more off with the cancelled games. There may be a slight opportunity for them there, but I'm just struggling to see where they're going to find their form from. I think the miss of Ronnie Lopez is obviously pretty sizable, and that he's not a player easily replaced by Thierry Henry. In fact, he's irreplaceable at the moment in this squad, and perhaps the situation would be almost entirely different if he'd been fit since the start of the season. But of course, that's not the case. But the game against Amiens was a funny one because they won with 2 penalties, one very, very late on, and they soaked up pressure and sat back, and Amiens had most of the ball and perhaps deserved a draw at least on the balance of play. And the Con game, where that Radamel Falcao free kick, the Falcao's obviously still a brilliant player. He scored both the penalties in the game against Amiens, and I don't think they're good enough to not certain. I think that's not the right phrasing, but they can't rely on him all the time. He's not going to get the chances to win them games because he's not necessarily a player that's going to win games on his own at this stage of his career. And given the form he's had of late, he is a player that will produce moments of brilliance on occasion, but he can't be expected to do it every week. And without him, where do they go? Golovin's not really found his feet. He's been injured. Tielemans is very up and down, still very young and learning. Jovetic is injured and very temperamental too. I just think that this team will spend the rest of the season battling relegation, and I don't see that upward curve coming anytime soon. It's really quite worrying, and I think that they need to accept, and I think they have accepted, that staying up this season would be good. That's finishing 17th, avoid even 18th, and getting in the relegation playoff and winning that would be a decent result based on the turnover of players, the young players they've been using, the injuries they've had, the new manager, and a questionable recruitment as well. I think that they just need to accept that they're a relegation team this season and then move past it, and next season is their season, hopefully. But a long way to go for Monaco.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the disappointing thing, really, Adam. And I was thinking about this really after the Montpellier game. It was that cold game. They struggled, but they got through it. They got the result they needed. And the first half in that Montpellier game, they got the goal they needed. They played pretty well, to be fair. Golovin was looking sharp, and so was Tielemans, and so was Falcao. And they were finally looking like maybe pieces were coming together. But again, the defence just lets them down. I mean, the second goal especially, Jemison, I don't even know what Jemison's even trying to do really there. And he's fell off a face of a cliff, really. And if you can't defend when you're running out of confidence, and when you finally put a decent performance in for a half, where against the Montpellier side that's been pretty good this season and in all honesty, Monaco were definitely the stronger side in that first half, and they just let things slip away. And really, that Angers result the Amiens result was good, but the performance really wasn't there, and you start to worry that they, because they've obviously missed a midweek game, and Amiens got that win against Guingamp, it pounds a little bit more pressure, even more on this game than probably would have been had they played maybe the weekend before and got a result somewhere like that. But for Lyon, Jez, at the same time, while we say Monaco have been really struggling, we've seen Lyon stumble in games where we expect them to do better this season. I mean, in the early season against Reims, you could also argue the loss against Nice earlier in the season when they were really struggling in the opening couple of fixtures under Vieira. Also, the draw against Nantes, the draw against Bordeaux, where they should be seeing out games. Will that be a concern for Genesio after, especially all the outpour of the Champions League game in midweek? Is that a concern even against the Monaco side that are really, really struggling?
Yeah, I think it should be a concern. I mean, they would definitely start the match as favourites. It would be a big disappointment if they weren't to win. But we've all seen it before so many times with Lyon that while they often turn up for the bigger matches, they can also go missing even at home against smaller teams. Monaco aren't a small team, but in the context of this season, I guess they are. And particularly after a tough midweek match that would have taken a lot out of them mentally and physically, and probably a few of them have got chilblains in their toes and things as well, which isn't going to help. I think it's a match that they shouldn't take lightly. Monaco are fighting for their lives, and you mentioned Jemison in the defence. Actually, against Montpellier, I thought for the most part the defence was excellent, and it was Jemison who let them down. And arguably that's been the problem. Monaco has been their more experienced players letting them down. Badiashile for me looks a really good defender, and players like Heinrichs and Pierre Gabriel, who I think settling into the team. So I don't think they're going to make it easy for Lyon, but I would still expect Lyon to get through it. You've got players like Ndombele who didn't start yesterday, and Dembele too, so that they'll be sort of, as long as they're fully fit, they'll be chomping at the bit as well. So Lyon should be able to field, on paper, a much stronger team than Monaco are able to at the moment, and they should be able to win. But if they take their eye off the ball, as they often are want to do, then they could get a fight.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's why I'm going to go for a sneaky 1-1 prediction in this one. I think Monaco might just get a little bit of a result that they need, and maybe a little bit of a perk ahead of maybe their final game, really, before the winter break, and get themselves a little bit of confidence heading into that game against Guingamp, which would be massive, because if they can get a result there, they maybe can start kicking on after the winter break. But Adam, what do you think the score will be?
I'm worried for Monaco in this one. 3-0 Lyon.
Jez?
I really do think Monaco are improving, and I think it's good that they're well in touch now with other teams, but I can't see them winning this one. I'll go 2-0. 2-0.
It'll be certainly an interesting one to watch, and 3 really good games that we've at least managed to keep under the circumstances, at least. That's all that we have time for this evening. My thanks to Adam, Jez, and all of you listening at home. Do join us for the main show, which will be back on Sunday. But for now, enjoy your weekend of football.